Larkin Rose here, and a bunch of people have been asking me what I think of the armed march on Washington that Adam Kokesh is organizing for this July 4th. I'm a little bit tempted to wait till July 5th and then tell people whether it was a good idea or not, but yeah, that would be a little bit of a cop-out. So I'll give a few thoughts here. Three categories. First, the moral question, the moral issue. Second, the practical issue, what might happen, what good or bad. And third, the propaganda issue, what effect will it have on the way people think. I mean propaganda in the broad sense of the term, not necessarily deception and bad stuff, because propaganda has a negative connotation, but just what effect will it have on the way people think. So, issue number one, the moral question. Is it moral? Yes. Now, the media is already mischaracterizing what it's all about and making it sound like they're going to overthrow the government, which is not the, it's not an armed revolution to take over the Capitol. It's basically an act of civil disobedience. A bunch of people are going to go to Washington, D.C. carrying firearms, strapped on their backs, not here we are to violently take over, which is against the law in D.C. And the Washington police have already said, you're not going to do that there. Now, I just want to point out the funny hypocrisy of a bunch of people in Washington, D.C. with guns saying, you're not allowed to have guns in Washington, D.C. It perfectly exhibits the attitude that there should be a master class and a subject class, and the master class is allowed to do the things that the subject class isn't allowed to do, like have guns. At least have guns in certain places. So it's an act of civil disobedience. They want however many, 1,000 or 10,000. I saw different numbers in different places. I don't know if there's a certain amount they need before they'll do it, to basically start in Virginia, I think, and then walk over the bridge into Washington and break the law without threatening anybody, without being violent, without, again, guns strapped to their backs, not holding them like ready for combat. And it basically sounds like if the control freaks in Washington are going to make it into a violent situation, the plan is just to say, oh well, you showed yourself for the tyrannical freaks you are, and never mind, we'll leave. That's the plan as I heard it. So, first of all, it's perfectly moral. They're not threatening anybody. And the funny thing is, they're just doing what the DC police do every day, which is walk around Washington with guns. They're just saying, we're just as much people as you are. You don't have extra rights. You're not a ruling class. You're not a magical, superhuman kind of person. You're just people. We have the same rights as you. We get to be armed if you get to be armed. So morally, yeah, there's nothing threatening. There's nothing violent. It doesn't violate the non-aggression principle. They're not like going to barge into the Capitol building or the White House or whatever. They were just going to have a demonstration, walk up and down the streets being armed and say, here we are, we don't think we're subject to your stupid rules. Goodbye, have a nice day. So the moral question's an easy one. The practical thing is where I have a few concerns. First of all, instantly the media is going to twist it and mangle it, which they already have. I already saw a thing in the Washington Post where they're trying to badmouth Adam Kokesh of he's just doing this for attention for himself, and they're talking about armed revolution, so they're misrepresenting it and bashing him, and which is to be expected. My concern is that the control freaks, and this doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. The control freaks are going to try to characterize it as something it isn't, and make an excuse to react violently. Now, if I was an evil control freak, what I would do is have Adam Kokesh arrested probably a few days ahead of time, or taken hostage as an enemy combatant, just to mess up the event. Now, completely illegal and unwarranted and everything else. I'm not saying that's what should happen. I'm saying if I was a tyrannical psycho, that's what I would do to mess up the event, and say, well, you were planning on coming here with guns, you were planning on breaking the law, and you're evil and nasty. So that, and the possibility, of course, at the event of them trying to either instigate a reaction or infiltrate the protest and have people cause trouble to make an excuse for government to violently crack down, which they've only done 10 trillion times in the past. I think the best check against that would be cameras everywhere. You know, bring your gun, but bring a camera or 2 or 3. Have them rolling. Don't let the fascists take them away. Because if somebody instigates and you have cameras rolling everywhere, you'll be able to look back and say, hey, that guy did it, and golly gee, none of the rest of us knew who he was because he was a government plant. But they're obviously, they'll try to stop it at the bridge, and this is sort of my one complaint. Well, this actually moves into the third issue of the effect it'll have on the way people think, the propaganda aspect of it, which is the goal is to say, you're not our masters, we're not beholden to you, you say we're not allowed to have guns here, we're allowed to have guns here, and we're going to come walk around. We're not going to threaten you, we don't want to fight, we don't want violence, we just want to demonstrate that we don't really care what you think, we're human beings, we have the right to be armed, so here we are, and we'll do a walk and leave. So that's the actual message, but the way the media is going to twist it, the way the government's going to twist it is, oh my gosh, this is armed invasion of Washington, you're attacking us, you're the aggressor. Never mind that they've been very open about the fact that we're not coming to do violence to you, we're coming to walk around and go away. But it's going to be pretty easy to spin that just because most Americans can't imagine getting a gun and going to Washington because it's against the law. And they're so indoctrinated into thinking, never disobey the official decrees of the politicians, that it'll be easy to paint this event as the bad guys to all the state-worshipping, law-abiding tax slaves out there. So that's going to happen, obviously, but there can still be a positive effect. I mean, I would never say, don't do something because they're going to spin it badly. Of course they're going to spin. They spin everything to try to make an excuse for authoritarian control of the world. So I'm not saying don't do it because they're going to spin it, but this will be pretty easy for the control freaks to say, you evil, nasty people came here armed because you had evil intentions. Which is bogus, but so is everything government says. Now, here's sort of a weird backwards, sideways complaint. Adam has already said that if they meet forcible resistance, then basically they'll back down and just say, well, you've showed yourself for what you are. You're a bunch of control freak hypocrites who you're allowed to be armed in D.C. You have no respect for the people and the Second Amendment, the right to be armed and all that. So we'll go now, having made you show yourselves for what you are. And I think that's good. However, there's sort of an accidental message that I think is likely to happen without anybody even trying to make it happen, which is, if you go there and you get up to the bridge and they say, we're authority and you're not allowed in, and you say, okay, goodbye, in a way that can legitimize the authority of the control freaks. And I know Adam doesn't believe that, and that certainly is not the point, not what they're trying to do, but some people can say, well, okay, well, they did as they were told when they got there, and they walked away. What I think would have more of an impact, now there are reasons I wouldn't suggest this, and not now or not later. There are other reasons I wouldn't suggest this, but I think a more solid philosophical impact is if you could get 100,000, 200,000 people to tell the control freaks in Washington, look, here's what's going to happen. We're bringing our guns, we won't be holding them, they'll be on our backs, just like this event's going to be. We're going to come to that bridge. We're going to walk across that bridge. We're going to do a march wherever we do, and we're going to leave. If you use force to try to stop us, we will use overwhelming force to defeat you. In other words, if you initiate violence against us, we will use whatever level of violence it is necessary to defeat you. And then we're going to keep doing our march. And if you escalate it to the level of pointing guns at us, then we're going to shoot you. In self-defense. If you decide to raise a gun to us, then we're going to kill you. Again, I want to emphasize very loudly, this is not what they're doing. This is not what Adam Kokesh is planning. I'm doing a hypothetical situation of something that might have a different psychological effect. And again, there are reasons to not do this on a practical level. But imagine if basically 100,000 or 200,000 people counted coup. It's an Indian thing where basically you ride up to somebody with your spear and the person stands there and you demonstrate, you tap them on the shoulder, which shows, I totally could have just killed you, but I didn't. So there. Now we can get along better. If you had 100 or 200,000 people counting coup on Washington, basically going in and say, if you don't lift a finger to stop us, if you don't raise a gun at us, if you don't try to forcibly prevent us, we're just going to walk through and leave again. It's not that we're there to attack you, it's there to show you that if we wanted to, we could completely demolish you, but we don't want to. We just want to demonstrate, look, we're free, just leave us alone, and we'll leave you alone. And again, there would be downsides, and that would be spun negatively all over the place, and who knows what that would actually turn into. But I think that would be a very different mental impact. It would still freak out most of the country, and again, there are reasons to not do things that way. But to say we're not going to back down, we're just going to go for a walk. If you start the violence, we will respond with violence. Again, I want to emphasize this over and over again because the media is already going to spin this every way they can. This is not what this event's going to be. It's going to be, okay, if you're going to escalate it to violence, we'll stop and just the world will see that you're a bunch of violent control freaks. Which is a lot safer and a lot less dangerous. It just does have that one little drawback that it could, in a twisted, weird way, make people think, well, okay, as long as you turn back when the law tells you can't come in. So that's my one tiny little nitpick. I don't plan on being there myself. I hope lots and lots of people go there with cameras. I hope a lot of people without guns go with cameras, so that if they decide to go fascist on the people who do have guns, at least there'll be lots of footage of it in the hands of people hopefully not getting arrested or attacked or shot. But one last thought, turning it around and looking at it from the perspective of the control freaks and the tyrants, which I think is a good thing to do. It's what I compare to turning the chessboard around. If you want to see the game, turn it around, look at what the game looks like to the other side. And to the control freaks, they're out there saying, oh, you may not do this. They have to be worried. Because whatever they do, there are major pitfalls for them, for the tyrants and their mercenary control freaks. If they say, we're going to violently stop you, first of all, if several thousand people show up armed and the control freaks make it into a violent confrontation, that could get really nasty for the control freaks. I think it's very significant for this to happen in the backyard of the parasite class. For it to happen in California or somewhere else, the politician could say, well, whether there's a shootout or not, who cares? We don't care about our mercenaries or the people that are going to be shooting at, so I don't care. But when it's in Washington, D.C., and the control freaks can look out their window and see, holy smokes, there's the people. They're supposed to be our slaves and do as they're told, and they're out there with guns, not doing as they're told. That's going to have a major impact on the control freaks. Now, unfortunately, it may have a major impact and make them do something stunningly stupid, whether just open violent confrontation, whether we're going to have our own little Tiananmen Square routine, or a false flag, or an instigation, or any number of goofy, violent, stupid things the parasites could do to try to ward this off. If the tyrants are smart, now these days they aren't. They've been doing a lot of stupid things, which I'm happy about, because it makes their legitimacy fall apart in the eyes of their victims. If the tyrants are smart, they would just sort of say, nah, go ahead, we're not even going to pay that much attention to it. And they would tell their puppets in the media, just don't really report it. Just don't really say anything about it. Have some one paragraph on page Z a gazillion. And other than that, just ignore it. I think that's the tyrant's best move, from their perspective. I'm not rooting for the tyrants. I'm just saying tactically, if they just say, this doesn't really matter. Yeah, if you want to, blow off steam, having a little march, and then go home. That's fine. Because the outcome is really predictable. If the tyrants don't instigate violence, there isn't going to be violence. I know Adam, I know the type of person who's going with him. If they just stay out of the way, they're just going to have a demonstration and go home. The only way there will be violence is if the parasite class decides to make it into a violent conflict. And even then, it sounds like Adam and the people in this event are going to try pretty hard to avoid that. Like, if the control freaks decide to make it violent, they may just say, well, okay, you showed yourself for what you are, and we're going to go have a party back in Virginia or something. So, as far as is it a good idea, again, the ultimate cop-out will be for me to wait till the day after and then say whether it was a good idea. It could go a lot of different ways. I am concerned about Adam's safety, but, he's a grown-up. He can obviously handle himself. And he gets himself into these things on purpose to make a point. And I can't fault him for that. And to say, don't do it, that's dangerous, well, he knows that. He doesn't need me telling him that. And there are risks involved. He knows that too. The thing is, there are so many variables, so many ways the thing could go. It could end up, obviously there are practical risks involved of who knows what the psychos are going to stage to justify open violence. But also there's just, the way it will look to the American people will depend on a gazillion different things. The media will be hunting for anybody to interview, whether it's somebody real or a government plant, to make them look like crazy people. And so it's really hard to tell. It's just there's so many variables and so many factors. We won't know till after the fact what the actual result as far as people's mindsets is going to be. So I don't want to poo-poo it. There are definitely possible drawbacks, but I don't want to say it. I'm also not going to say, hey, everybody go do this. Although on the one hand, if this is going to happen, it would be a whole lot better if there are a lot of people there with guns, because that gives the control freaks a huge disincentive to try to start something. It's like the schoolyard bully. If one kid stands up to him, the schoolyard bully beats the tar out of him. If all the kids stand up, the bully goes, oh no, I don't need to fight you. So just, on that level, it would be good if it was in the thousands and thousands of people, because then the control freaks would have to say, just let them do it. Just keep it as quiet as we can. Don't really talk about it. Just say, okay, you can let off steam and do this little thing and then go away. Whereas the smaller the number of protesters, the easier it is for the control freaks to come out looking big and bad. Now, I looked it up. I think there's only a few thousand police in all of Washington. And so if you have 10,000 people, I have no idea how many people are going to show up. But if you have 10,000 people at an event like this, the police are hugely outnumbered and outgunned. And that actually gives them a huge incentive to be nice and just get out of the way and let it happen, and don't instigate it to violence. And that's a counterintuitive thing that comes up in lots of situations where even in the case of a common criminal attacking somebody, if somebody says, I'm going to fight you, common criminal goes, I don't care, I have a knife. Somebody says, I'm going to fight you, the criminal says, never mind, I'm going to leave. So the ability to use violence actually prevents violence a lot of the time. And, when it comes to private crime in this country, like 1.5 million to 2 million times a year, a crime is prevented just by showing, I have the ability to kill you. Do we want to keep playing this game, or do you want to go your way and let me go my way? And most times the aggressor will say, yeah, I don't really want to play this. It's the exact same thing on a larger scale when it comes to government. If the people say, look how heavily armed we are, look how many there are of us, and the government can just say, yeah, never mind, let's not play that game. There's this strange twist that the more capable you are of violence, and there are limits to this, but in a lot of cases, the more capable you are of violence, the less you have to use the violence. You just have to demonstrate your ability to, and then the aggressor decides, I don't really want to commit aggression against somebody who's that big a threat to me. So that's why I think it would be a lot better if a lot of people were at the event, if it's going to happen at all. But there are risks, and you know, who knows what the heck the government's trying to think up. I do think they're putting on a face of, we're confident and we'll stop this, and they're probably just peeing in their pants behind the scenes, because it won't be under their control. You know, whatever they try to stage, whatever propaganda, whatever spin, whatever, you know, infiltrate it and try to mess it up this way, whatever they're planning, they know it's a giant unknown for them too. So it'll be interesting. I can't really say whether I'm for it or against it. It's just, it's kind of what it is. You know, Adam Kokesh knows what he's doing, knows what he's getting into, he knows the risks, and he knows his enemy and what they're gonna, all the things they may try to do. So sorry if you were hoping I'd end this with, yes, definitely go, or no, this is a bad idea. But I have to just end with, I don't know. Let's see what happens. It could go a lot of different ways, and the one thing I would say is everyone pay close attention to what happens. However it turns out, pay attention. I mean, this is what happened in my fun with the IRS and the court system. I said, however this turns out, just watch, because there will be a lot to learn no matter what happens. So I would say, lots of people, pay attention, have your cameras, record it. After the fact, we can decide if it was a good idea in practical terms, but I guarantee there will be things to learn from it, and things that demonstrate the mindset of the ruling class one way or another. So if they go through this, if they get enough people, then I wish them the best of luck, and I hope the tyrants are smart enough for their own good and the good of the protesters to just say, we'll just let them get away with ignoring the law this time. We'll let them do their protest, their event, and leave, and we'll just stay out of the way. Because that would make it a lot safer for everybody. The one downside for the control freaks is they basically admit, yeah, if enough of you disobey, there's nothing we can do about it. And that's I think basically that's the point of the event, is to show, look, if we all disobey, there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the one reason they're probably trying to find some way to sabotage or mess this up, because they don't want people to learn that if all of us disobey the tiny dot, as in my other video, if we all disobey that dumb little gang of narcissistic, sociopathic control freaks, they lose all their power. It's only because most people most of the time obey that they have any power at all. So I don't know what's going to happen. I hope the tyrants are smart enough to just kind of stand out of the way and let it happen and let it go away and let it pass. But we shall see. I don't dare to make any magical predictions, and I'm not going to wildly praise this, and I'm not going to condemn it either. We'll just learn what there is to learn from whatever happens.